Hello, everyone. My name is Kaytan Kelkar. I am a geosciences PhD student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Today, I will present on two case studies based in Colorado and Alaska pertaining to identifying slope instability in mountain permafrost terrain. I will start with my take-home messages. My findings indicate that aspect, slope, and geology have the greatest relative influence on slope failure in the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado. I discerned that talus and landslide deposits are the most widespread superficial phenomenon in the San Juan Mountains. The next phase in my work is to implement this approach used in the San Juan Mountains to the mountain permafrost in the Alaska Range. A combination of permafrost monitoring and modeling will constrain the timing and location of future landslides. We are currently working towards establishing a permafrost slope monitoring network across Alaska. I will aim to address the following research problems. Although previous work has identified the occurrence of permafrost on mountain slopes, identifying the role of permafrost in propagating slope failure is far from complete. I want to focus my research endeavor in improving our understanding of the permafrost mechanisms driving slope instability. Warming is pushing steep permafrost terrain out of both thermal as well as geomorphological equilibrium, which will lead to increased frequencies of mass movement. The weakening of unstable rock masses poses a serious hazard in mountain regions. Thus, the need to inform mountain communities of the dangers of living in a dynamic landscape is vital. A major drawback in permafrost research within Alaska is the sparse in situ monitoring of permafrost-rich slope sites. I will tackle this shortcoming by starting a long-term slope monitoring program by establishing a robust network of sites across Alaska. Overall, the need to promote best land use practices is crucial to saving lives and reducing damage to infrastructure from mass movement. We want to certainly avoid catastrophic scenarios such as this image, where unfortunately a house is constructed at a foot of an avalanche track. The first phase of my work was carried out as part of my master's thesis, which involved GIS-based landslide susceptibility mapping in Colorado. The San Juan Mountains have a legacy of slope instability. The present-day topography of the San Juan Mountains is a result of orogeny, extensive volcanism, glacial erosion, and fluvial activity. The two dominant lithologies are Cretaceous sedimentary rocks and tertiary igneous rocks, which comprise limestones, shales, massive lava flows, and breccia, respectively. The San Juan Mountain region was mapped for landslide hazards in the 1970s. Since then, a focus on mapping of present-day landslide susceptibility in the area has been nearly absent. This research was motivated by the inadequate investigation and the need to implement an up-to-date landslide study highlighting the risk from mass movement in the area. I pursued to examine the factors causing slope failure and map morphological features indicative of slope failure in the San Juan Mountains. The landslide susceptibility map was created using a weighted overlay approach by integrating 6 terrain variables, namely slope, slope length, geology, aspect, vegetation cover, and soil drainage. I used the principal component analyses, or PCA, a mathematical procedure which transforms several possibly correlated variables into smaller number of uncorrelated variables or principal components. After calculating the eigenvalues from the PCA method, the relative influence on slope failure from aspect, slope, and geology was 48%, 34%, and 9% respectively, as displayed on the chart to the right. Each spatial layer was mapped to a common suitability scale and assigned as a weight as percentage for slope failure based on the rank determined by the PCA procedure. The equation used to produce the susceptibility to landslide map is on the bottom left. Specifically for geology, I calculated the surface roughness displayed in the equation on the bottom right. I determined that east and west facing slopes are highly and very highly susceptible to landslides as shown in these rose diagrams. Varied aspect sets the stage for differing microclimatic conditions on slope faces. Aspect is important in regulating precipitation, subsequent vegetation growth, moisture retention, and solar radiation on slopes. I categorized slope in 4 categories. Class 2 slopes within 22 to 44 degrees are highly and very highly susceptible to landslides. I did not have the chance to further examine the role of aspect and slope. This is definitely a theme I hope to pursue in the near future. I constructed a sufficient geology and geomorphological map of the detailed study area at a scale of 1:3000. Mapped superficial landforms were categorized as glacial landforms, glaciofluvial landforms, fluvial and water, gravitational landforms, morphological components, outcrop geology, and periglacial landforms. Mapping was completed using a combination of field reconnaissance and air photo interpretation. Talus and landslide deposits are the most prevalent superficial phenomenon in the area. Mapped landforms demarcate the extents of former valley glaciers. This map is a reference for future landslide studies in the area. With a growing need to delineate areas prone to landslides for future development in this mountain terrain, this map and the GIS-based landslide susceptibility map can promote efficient land use practices for sustainable land management. I divided landslide susceptibility into 4 classes: low, moderate, high, and very high, using the Jenks natural classification. This is a robust 10 by 10 meter raster 3D model, which is an applicable educational resource for those who have difficulty in visualizing landscapes and pertinent geomorphic processes in a dynamic environment. The virtual model presents the viewer an opportunity to visualize landslide occurrence with respect to the topography of the San Juan Mountains. 3D visualization allows the viewer to maneuver the model accordingly to interpret highly vulnerable slopes. A virtual flyby of the study area provides the layperson a dynamic, true-to-life perspective of an active landscape. My goal is to further apply this approach in the permafrost-affected mountains within Alaska. Mountain permafrost degradation is having a significant effect on the Alaskan landscape. This is the Pretty Rocks section of the 92-mile park road within Denali National Park. This section is subsiding at a rate of 20 centimeters per day. This road is the only mode of access to and from Denali National Park, which is undergoing numerous repairs. Falling rocks and landslides pose a serious hazard to those commuting on the road. This slide shows our initial efforts in establishing a permafrost monitoring network. Now our focus will shift to obtain ground temperature measurements from bedrock permafrost present on slopes to discern a thermal gradient. In conjunction with ground temperature measurements, I will conduct electrical resistivity tomography or ERT, on thaw-vulnerable slopes. This Google Earth image shows the current location of 1.5 meter boreholes near the Denali Park Road. They might be difficult to see, but these white dots demarcate the location of our 1.5 meter boreholes. Additional borehole installations to 5 meter depth is planned for spring 2022. Continuous ground temperature measurements from the Healy site situated in the Alaska range is showing an overall warming trend. The red line represents 0.6 meter depth measurements, which shows a greater variability. Unfortunately, the colder temperatures are progressively no longer remaining cold as observed from the time frame from 2016 to 2020. To summarize my next steps, I will conduct geomorphological and geophysical surveys of thaw-vulnerable slopes. I will identify varied terrain for specific mass movement types. I will install deeper temperature boreholes at representative sites across Alaska. I will combine permafrost monitoring and modeling to predict future landslide events. This proposed work will have a valuable resource for regional planners and cold region engineers. Also, this research will further advance our understanding of periglacial landslides. I want to reiterate my take-home messages. My findings indicate that aspect, slope, and geology have the greatest relative influence on slope failure in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. I discern that talus and landslide deposits are the most widespread superficial deposits in the San Juan Mountains. My next phase in my work is to implement this approach used within the San Juan Mountains to the mountain permafrost within the Alaska range. A combination of permafrost monitoring and modeling will constrain the timing and location of future landslides. We are currently working towards establishing a permafrost slope monitoring network across Alaska. I thank the U.S. Permafrost Association for this opportunity to present my work. These are my references. You can email me with any questions you may have on my work or this presentation. Thank you all once again for your attention.